So let me go to the hospital and get this breathing right, and I'll be right back. And she deteriorated. I think it was a Sunday. And she deteriorated like so fast by like Tuesday, she was on the ventilator, Thursday, kidney failure, Friday, swollen the brain, and she just fought for the next 4 weeks.
My husband was calling saying, they dismissing me out the hospital. I'm like, dismissing you out the hospital? He said, yeah. I said, well, why would they dismiss you out the hospital? Are you feeling better? No. We picked him up. He was so weak, he couldn't even get out the wheelchair, and the guy wouldn't help him. So I had to get out, help him get in the car, and bring him back home. He was weaker going home than he was when I brought him to the hospital. So Tuesday, I said, well, doctor, we just gonna have to go back to a hospital. And he went on the ventilator sometime that Wednesday night. And that was the last conversation that we got a chance to have. They lost him. Yeah. My heart is just torn. I've never been alone, So all of this is, excuse me, very new to me.
Racism disguises itself as medicine when you don't give the same care to your Black patient that you would want for your mother, for your sister, for your husband. When you don't take the time to explain a complex procedure to them because you believe that they A, can't afford the operation, they B, don't understand the complexities, and they 3, won't follow the post-operative care. So you don't even offer it as an option. Whereas the white patient, you've explained option A, B, C, maybe even something experimental, but you don't take the time to explain it to your Black patient. And that is evidence-based. That's proven, and the Institutes of Medicine say that white doctors spend less time explaining complex procedures to Black patients. Why? Because we're not smart enough? You think we're not going to get it. You think we won't agree to doing it. So why waste my time explaining it to you?
There are 2 main therapies for people with advanced kidney failure. They can go on hemodialysis, where they get dialysis 3 times a week, or they can get a kidney transplant. Kidney transplant is superior. It's much, much better. Obviously more painful up front, but once you get the transplant, you can essentially live a normal life. What we know is that Black people are much less likely to get a kidney transplant than white people. So the question is why? When you do surveys of those doctors and say, why do you make the decisions that you do? They say, well, I make it based on my assumption of who can go through a transplant and get through it. Because it's a difficult process to go through a kidney transplant. So again, that's that assumption. The doctors are assuming that it's going to be harder for that Black patient to make it all the way through the process, and so therefore they're less likely to refer. But what we know from the data and from the evidence is that physicians and nurses treat people differently based on their race.
My name is Cheryl Jean Fowler. I live in Gulf Point Woods, Michigan. My husband, Gary F. Fowler, died from COVID.
My name is Keith Gambrell. I'm 33 years old, from Detroit, Michigan. And Gary Larnell Fowler was my father. When I was 7 years old, at a 4th of July party that his brother Greg was having, my mom's best friend, her name's Ing, she invited my mom and me to go with her to a party. And as we are coming into the apartment complex, my dad and his brother are playing football. And my mom's best friend goes, there he goes, Cheryl, that's what I was talking about, point to my dad. She was like, he's all right, he's cute.
At first, I didn't think he was my type. Like I have a type, but his personality is what did it. Big heart, didn't see wrong in anyone. Our first date was, he had 2 kids, I had 2 kids. So my kids and his kids, we went out on a dinner date. We were the package deal, so our kids went with us. And ever since then, we've been together. We got married April 21st, 1999.
Me being the rebellious little 7-year-old that I was, like, this guy is trying to take my mom from me, you know? That's what I'm thinking as a kid. He's trying to take my mom from me, but he was a blessing, you know? He taught me how to work, taught me what it was to take care of a family, how to be independent, how to not depend on anyone to take care of you but yourself, how to be truthful, how to treat your friends that you call your friends, and how you should be treated as a man in life.
My husband worked 80 hours a week to take care of his family. He was a workaholic. That's what everybody called him. Well, Mr. Workaholic.
To leave 6 in the morning, want to get back home to 6 o'clock Tuesday morning. So he did that for a while, just to make sure his family was in a safe area, that they didn't have to worry about coming out the house, someone trying to take stuff from him, or leaving the house and coming back, someone breaking in. My dad worked his ass off to make sure that his family didn't need and want for anything.
We went everywhere together. My husband couldn't drive because my husband has a problem with his feet from his diabetes, so I was the driver. That father lived 20 minutes away from us. They didn't talk every day, they would see each other. Dad had him and his twin at 18. So they grew up together.
My grandfather started to feel sick the week of March 20th, 2020. But March 23rd, 2020, my Aunt Shelly, she called me. She goes, I can't get a hold of anybody, but Grandpa needs some Gatorade, some chicken noodle soup. And I think your mom and your dad's on their way over there, but can you just go check on Grandpa? My dad lets us in. As soon as he gets in the house, he's upstairs with Grandpa. And I scream upstairs. I go, Grandpa, how you feeling? He goes, I'm okay, baby boy. I got the stomach flu. I'll be okay. 10:45 that night, my brother Garrett gets home from work. Calls me, tells me that he just found Grandpa passed out on the bathroom floor. Well, I get there as fast as I can. I go, Grandpa, let's go to the hospital to get you checked out. He's like, no, I'm not going to the hospital. If I go to the hospital, I'm not coming home. So I go, Grandpa, don't say that. Like, do me a favor and go to the hospital. I'll cook you whatever you want, you know, when you get home. He goes, all right, baby boy, let's go. So I go downstairs to talk to my brother Garrett in the kitchen. My grandfather's coming down the stairs on a stretcher with the EMS. One's in front, one's behind. I go, Grandpa, I'll see you when you get home. Like, I love you. He goes, I'll see you, baby boy. I love you too. And Aunt Shelly calls us 2 days later, tells us that Grandpa tested positive for the coronavirus, and my dad, my mom, and myself need to try to find a way to get tested. So I go tell Aunt Shelly, I go, it doesn't work like that. Like, they're not just giving out tests to random people who think they have the virus for some reason. You guys are shutting schools, corporations, everything down to protect certain people, but yet and still you're telling people to go home. Like, it makes no sense. The day she tells us to get tested, this is also the day after he talks to his doctor, April 1st. Diagnoses are fever of an unknown origin, fatigue, nausea and vomiting, nasal congestions. All the signs for COVID-19, and he couldn't get a test. It's about 3 o'clock. I'm looking at my dad. He just looks tired, you know, looks winded. I go, Dad, you okay? He goes, yeah, it's just the bronchitis, but he's coughing as he's talking to me. So I go, you want to go to the hospital and get checked out, man? Because I believe you guys could possibly have the virus since you were around Grandpa. So we go to Beaumont. My dad goes in. He's there probably 2 hours, comes back out. His discharge paper says that he has bronchitis, okay? But to go home and come back to the hospital if you really need medical assistance. Beaumont is one of the richest cities in the United States. I think they honestly looked at this black man and said that, oh, you're fine. You're just overthinking what you see on TV, you know? Like, it doesn't work like that. It doesn't work like that. He heard that more than one time. March 30th, I call my mom. Now they both have fevers. She has a lower fever of 100 this day, but my dad's fever is 101. So now we're on our way to Detroit Receiving, which is in Detroit, Michigan. Have it quarantined. The nurses are outside with the heart monitor, the thermometer, before you can even go into the hospital. My dad gets out. He walks up to the nurse, and he tells her that his father is in Henry Ford Hospital on a ventilator due to COVID. He's experiencing diarrhea, a high temperature, dry cough, stuffy nose, a headache, all the symptoms that's on TV that they're telling people to look out for. My dad's telling this nurse that he has these symptoms. The nurse looks at my father and tells him, oh, sir, you're better off going to Henry Ford Hospital because they're more equipped to handle the COVID situation. I don't know what their reasoning was to tell my dad to leave a hospital to go to a different hospital. We took my dad to Henry Ford after being turned away from Detroit receiving. The nurse checks him out. She lets him in, so we're thinking our dad's about to get help this time. This is my dad's discharge papers for the same day, March 30th, 2020, from Henry Ford Hospital in Detroit, Michigan. Please follow the instructions below. Testing for COVID-19 is very limited and has been restricted to those who are severely ill. In the future, you may be able to get tested. For the next 2 weeks, you need to behave as if you have COVID-19. Quarantine and isolate yourself. Wear a face mask when you are around other people. Clean your hands often. Avoid sharing personal household items. Clean all high-touch surfaces every day. Monitor your symptoms. My dad was crying in the passenger seat because he said they were going to let him die. They want to help him. He said he was done going to hospitals. Said he was just take care of it himself.
Came back home, we were getting weaker, sat in a recliner. The boys helping him get to the bathroom, taking him showers. He said after that he wasn't going back anymore because he was tired of getting turned away. So I told him, call the doctor, see if she can get him in the hospital. And she told him there was no beds available. That she wanted to see him the next day.
April 6th, 11:45 p.m. I talked to my dad. He calls me, he goes, Grandpa just died. I go, how you doing, Dad? He goes, I'm just tired, son.
And I asked him, was he okay? He said, yeah, I'm okay. He was like he was asleep.
I go to sleep. My phone rings. It's about 7:35. My brother Troy screaming like, Daddy gonna wake up, Daddy gonna wake up. I'm like, what do you mean gonna wake up? Like, wake him up, you know what I'm saying? Like, wake him up. He's like, no, man, he gone. I was like, what do you mean he gone, bro? He was like, Daddy gone, man, he's gone. I stayed 20 minutes away from my parents. I get to their house in 8 minutes because I'm just flying down 8 Mile. Like, if the police were to pull me over, you're coming with me to my parents' house because I'm not stopping for anything. I got to get to my dad. I go in the house, I go upstairs. My dad is sitting in his recliner chair next to the bed. My mom and him slept in for forever. He looks asleep, but he's just blue. He's just not moving. He's not there. So when I seen him like that, I didn't even remember walking out the house. I just wound up back in my car, like my dad's gone. And I know the reason that he's gone because he couldn't get help. Like my dad didn't just die out of nowhere. He's 56. So I called my son, Carmine. I tell him, like, Papa's gone, buddy. He went to heaven. And he just broke down over the phone. I'm just sitting in my car crying.
When they came and hooked him up to the machine or whatever they do, they said that he was already gone. So I asked them, was they going to take him? And they said, no, you have to call the funeral home to come get him because we're not taking him. My husband sat in the house for 7 hours.
Police were being assholes. They were more concerned about my car, where it came from, than my dad being up here sleeping dead in the chair. Dad had a cut of phlegm. It was mixed with blood next to him that he had to the right in his recliner. But underneath the cut was a letter. Heart rate irregular, oxygen levels low, and then it has his doctor's name, which is Jackie. It was like a cry for help. I go upstairs. I talked to him, I sat with him, I prayed with him. Told him we would take care of Mom. We would take care of the house. We're gonna put everything you taught us to use. We're gonna make you proud. I miss your phone calls. I miss your laugh. I miss her conversations. I miss your advice to me. I just miss you, man.
I have a great relationship with my healthcare provider. You may have a great relationship with your healthcare provider. But what about the millions of Americans whose experience is different from mine and from yours? Yes, all of us make mistakes, but when mistakes become a pattern, We all need to pay attention, especially when lives are at stake. Health disparities were identified as a crisis in healthcare way back in 2003. That's 19 years ago. So little has changed since then. Our healthcare system is made up of so many caring individuals. We all know this, but the history of unequal treatment based on a patient's race cannot be denied. We have so much in common, and yet people of color are treated differently by a healthcare system that promises to do no harm. Sadly, it happens every day. Let's listen to the people behind the numbers. Let's get to know the life stories that show us what it means to live with health disparities. They have so much to teach us. Think about this. What if each encounter with the healthcare system began with a recognition of our shared humanity? What if you saw yourself in that person? You saw your mother, you saw your sister, you saw your father. What if treating every patient as we would want to be treated? What if that were actually happen? It would lead to massive change and improving the lives of so many. We're fighting the impact of decades of mistreatment, but we are the ones who get to decide to do better. We can do better. So let's make the choice to be better and do better our future. Together, I know we can do it.
It's Black people, it's people of color, it's Latinos who are saying the things that you're telling us to do, we physically cannot do. We cannot stop going to work because we have to pay our bills.
When he was at the hospital, he comes and tells me, Sydney, they sent me over to this room and everybody was like wearing a hood, wearing like long gloves, wearing plastic covers. And they called me up and told me, go clean that room. You gotta go, you gotta be ready for the next patient. They didn't tell him anything. They just pretty much threw me in there. So like on your own. That's probably why he got sick. The doctor went into his room and told him he was gonna die from COVID. And there was nothing he can do about it. Then I called my dad and I told him, he goes, I'm gonna do everything I can to get you out safe. Then I started calling everybody I could, to the people, to the doctors I know personally. And he goes to me, he goes like, Sydney, no, I'm not coming out of this. Because I'm giving up. I'm tired. I'm just, he goes, just, this is it. I'm not coming out of this. From that point, I never saw him again. If they would have told my dad at the clinic where he worked to wear a mask, to wear gloves, he would be here now.
Every Saturday in May.
Just know that I got it, and we were online on hold for like 6 hours, and we just couldn't get through. We would go to the emergency room. They would send us back home. Then he got really, really sick, and I had to rush him back to the emergency room. The nurse wouldn't let me in, and they put him in a wheelchair. And he just looked at me, and he just said, like, Mel, I want you to know that I never knew a love like this before. I love you so much. And I said, I love you too. We're gonna get through this. You're gonna get through this. You're young, you're healthy. But
we have a particularly difficult problem of an exacerbation of a health disparity. We've known
literally forever.
We get this striking moment where Anthony Fauci says, we've known literally forever that Black people have a higher rate of diabetes, of obesity, of asthma, of all the different things that make the coronavirus especially deadly.
When you look at the predisposing conditions that lead to a bad outcome with coronavirus, the things that get people into ICUs that require intubation and often lead to death, they are just those very comorbidities that are unfortunately disproportionately prevalent in the African American population. So we're very concerned about that. It's very sad. It's nothing we can do about it right now except to try and give them the best possible care to avoid those complications.
And Dr. Fauci's words underscores what America was dealing with. It was that we couldn't change our society. We couldn't go back and give Black people better access to healthcare retroactively. And even though some people thought it was callous for Dr. Fauci to say there's literally nothing we can do, we've known about this forever, he was right. We know that a lot of Americans are going to die. And we know that a lot of those Americans are going to disproportionately be Black people. This is not a coincidence.
So at every single step, long-standing systemic racism of where people live, what kind of jobs they have, what kind of doctors they have access to, what kind of hospitals they have access to, just chipped away at what we first thought was going to be equal effects on white and Black communities. And what we saw at the end was not a small difference, but a huge one. These large gaps, much, much higher likelihood of getting infected, getting sick, and dying. Still true today. I think the frontline doctors and nurses have done a heroic job. I don't think the blame is there. But the healthcare system should have been much, much more prepared for this and should have seen this coming. And that didn't happen. We often say, oh, that's just biology. It's so much easier to just explain it as biology. We've taken these effects of longstanding racism and we've almost created a biology around it, around lung function. We somehow think that there are differences in lung function between white and Black people, and the most classic of which is around pain thresholds and this idea that Black patients have higher pain thresholds, which is really an idea straight out of slavery and still continues to affect the way doctors think today. And so if you take something like hypertension, which again, we just sort of, in passing make the remark, oh yeah, Black patients are more likely to have hypertension than white patients. Well, what's that about? What's going on there? How did that happen?
But there are some days I miss that phone call. There are some days I wish that I could just drive to his apartment and be like, Poppy, did you eat? Let's go get something to eat, Could you cook some food? Can you make some fish?
When we first got married and we were living in an apartment, and I would be so happy when he came home, and what have you. And I used to wash his feet, Yep. I just love hearing him come home and knowing we was there together. That's my Billy. That's my Billy. I don't look at this. I don't open this book and look at this, but that's him. That's him. That's Billy. That's my Billy.
42% of African American adults over the age of 20 also suffer from hypertension. 28.7% of non-Hispanic white adults suffer from that. So what you see is consistently, when you look at diabetes, when you look at having a child, when you look at asthma, when you look at living your life, that African Americans have a harder time at living healthy and at being able to have access to health.
A Black baby during slavery was 1.6 times more likely to die as a white baby. And today they're twice as likely to die. A Black mother in the United States is 3 to 4 times more likely to die in childbirth. 3 to 4 times more likely to die. It is absolutely damning and immoral that even as life expectancy has gone up over the last century, Black Americans are lagging behind by 5 to 7 years of meaningful life. That infants are consistently twice as likely to die if they're Black. I think the time is part of what's so damning. It's not just the disparity is now, it's that disparity has been there. And in spite of all the societal progress that modern technology has gotten us, all of the material comforts we have, that gap, meaning racism, has not gone away.
We have to look at this in the face and say, Black people are under some real stress when it comes to racism. The coronavirus was like a heat-seeking missile, and Black people and communities that had been neglected were exactly where it found its target.
My name is Cassandra Rollins. I'm from Jackson, Mississippi, and I'm a prior substitute teacher. I have 4 children, 2 in heaven and 2 here. My oldest is Shalandra Rollins. My second oldest is Sherry Rollins. My third oldest is Tabitha Rollins. And my youngest is Tyler Ollie, who is deceased. My oldest and my youngest is deceased. Shalandra was a teacher, assistant teacher. They put her with the special needs children, and she just blossomed, and the kids loved her, the staff loved her. The children, period, was just her passion.
Shalandra was the ultimate older sister. So supportive. She would fuss, but anything we called for her, she was gonna do. Any party you needed help with, if you needed anybody to go to the store with you, if you needed anything, she was always gonna be there to help.
She could have went out to eat if she wanted to, but Lorna wanted to come to the house to have her food with her family before she went out to her bar. So let's prepare, let's say our grace, prepare to have food and celebrate her big accomplishment.
Shalandra started feeling sick. It was in March, and she kept saying my sinuses bothered me. Then she kept saying my head hurting, and she would say she had the chills. I said, Shalandra, that ain't no sinus. I said, you need to go to the doctor.
She went to see her doctor, and they told her that she had the flu. Told her to go home and self-quarantine and gave her some antibiotics, and that was it.
I said, how are you feeling? She said, I feel okay, just a little winded.
Tuesday morning, April the 7th, and she complained that she couldn't catch her breath. I had heard a loud sound, like something was falling in the bedroom. So I ran in and opened the shower door, and she was on the floor. Her body was in between the shower, the tub, and the door. And I didn't want to hit her in the head with the door, so I kind of just nudged her until I can get the door open, and she was just there fighting for breath.
I didn't know whether she fell out unconscious or what it was, so I panicked. I started screaming and hollering and praying and asking God, please, not again, don't take my child.
Her daughter came in, and I gave her my phone. I said, dial 911. If it's to the point to where someone calls 911 and an ambulance is dispatched, that's an emergency. I don't care how minute you feel it is, what the operator told you prior to you getting on the scene. We were called, so it's an emergency. And I feel like it should be treated as such.
There were no lights on or anything.
I know they had the mask up and everything, but it's ways you put on a mask. You put on a mask quick, or you...
took them forever to get the gurney in. And she was just laying there, and I was like, just calm down. I was trying to fan her. She kept saying she was hot and she was cold. But the entire time she was alert. They didn't even get her off the floor. They told her fiance to do it. He had to get her off the floor, put her in the chair, and push her to them.
Nobody gave her any oxygen. She was clearly struggling for breath. No one gave her oxygen.
They said they were waiting on her medicine. We gave them the medicine. They still sat in her living room for a moment before they even wheeled her out.
They stood outside and had a conversation after she was put into the ambulance.
They just were so lackadaisy, like, oh, okay, she'll be all right. It was just a fear in my sister's eyes. And she's such a strong person. Like, I wanted a big brother, but I never needed one because my sister was my friend, my protector, everything. So to see her scared was just like, it broke me. I called and asked to speak to the triage nurse. She was getting all my sister's information, so in my mind, she needs the information because they're already working on my sister. 15 minutes after that, the chaplain called me. When it was a chaplain, I knew it wasn't anything good. And as soon as he said it, I dropped the phone.
I didn't know that when I was handing her that bag in the back of the ambulance, that would be the last time that I would see her. To be honest with you, when I gave her that bag, I expected for her to be home in a couple of hours.
When I finally gathered myself and I could talk, I called the chaplain back. And it was almost like he wanted me to know that they didn't do anything wrong because he kept saying she was the only patient they were working on. The ER wasn't busy. They did everything they could. And my intuition was like, I think he's trying to appease me so that I won't ask any more questions. But I needed to know what happened to my sister because nobody was there for her. And that's when I found out that she was still on a gurney when she coded. The autopsy, we didn't ask about maybe until 2 days later. The autopsy lab was too full and that we couldn't get it. They have nowhere in Mississippi that could do an autopsy. And once I started getting conflicting stories from the chaplain and the nurse and then the charge nurse, I wanted to know what they were hiding, but they stopped responding. Every time I would leave a message, they wouldn't call me back. If she was not black, and if she had the good insurance is what I'll call it, she would have been in the hospital with the best equipment, with the best things. Or even if she wasn't black, I guarantee you she wouldn't have been sitting out on a gurney in a hospital with a known COVID diagnosis.
I don't know whether it's black women or just the whole black population, but they treat you different. I can honestly say in Mississippi and Jackson, when you have insurance and when you don't have insurance, you're gonna get better treatment. If you go to the hospital with no insurance, and you're complaining of pain, they're just gonna give you some pain medicine and get it. But if you go to the hospital with pain and you got insurance, they're gonna run tests to see where that pain coming from. So yes, we are treated different. And I've been on both sides of the coin. I've not had insurance and I've had insurance, and I noticed the difference in the treatment. This family has suffered a tremendous loss at the hand of negligence of other people, people's in authority, from the government to the ambulance to the hospital. The people that's supposed to protect us.
Without my foundation, I feel like I'm just on a bridge and it could fall at any moment. And I don't know when something else gonna fall. I live in fear of who's the next person.
But right now, I feel how I felt that day.
If she was white, they wouldn't have made us help get her up. They would have been out their house quick. They would have had sirens on when they came, because the community that she lived in is majority black. So they are, in my mind, they already knew they were going to a black person's house. That's why there was no sense of urgency or this is somebody's life, because I don't think our life matters to them.
Medicine is made up of some things that everybody kind of thinks of when they think medicine, right? Doctors and nurses and clinics and hospitals. But of course, there's a lot more to it than just that. There's the labs where you get your tests. There's the x-ray machine places. There are the insurance companies that actually pay, and they'll pay for some things, but not others. There's government agencies that regulate and oversee all of this. The products that, like the medicines, the pharmaceutical companies, the companies that will make devices. You get a hip replacement, somebody's got to make that hip. The electronic records, for instance, where your doctor types in his or her notes. It's a super complicated system. Millions and millions of people involved, trillions of dollars. Hard to kind of wrap it all into one group, but they're all influential. And they all end up having an impact on what care you get when you go see that doctor.
There are a number, though, of perverse incentives in American healthcare. Large numbers of Americans are using public health insurance, and even more will in the near future. And Medicaid pays hospital less than commercial insurance does. And people of color, Black people, Latinx people, or immigrants are much more likely to use public insurance. That affects the care that they get. We have one of the most expensive healthcare systems in the world, and we get some of the worst results.
Off the coast of
What it's like trying to access care as a Black person in America, it's like climbing a wall that's slicked with grease. I am from Philadelphia, born in North Philadelphia. North Philly is one of the poorest parts of Philadelphia. This city has given me so much of my toughness, so much of my ability to tell the truth, mean what you say what you mean. I am deeply troubled this morning with the number of coronavirus cases and deaths increasing substantially and more profoundly in African American communities in Philadelphia, in Michigan, in Detroit, in California, in New Orleans, everywhere. There was a lack of government action in Philadelphia, so I took action. I got all my Black doctor friends together from all over.
Dr. Pierre Shaman.
Dr. Wardlaw. And we put out a video saying how you could prevent transmission, how you could keep yourself safe.
Stay 6 feet away.
Wear a mask. And then I decided to go a step further and started the Black Doctors COVID-19 Consortium. I thought really hard about the name Black Doctors. And I was very intentional because I know that Black people don't trust the medical establishment, have never trusted.
Greg, you guys want to move the van pretty well?
We know that Black doctors have better outcomes with Black patients.
I need a crew that's going to come with me and we're going to walk.
No one was getting paid at all. Every person that showed up and worked 8 or 12 hours a day, they were there because they wanted to be there. They exposed themselves when 1 in 4 person in Philadelphia had coronavirus. When Black people were dying at a rate greater than everyone else, here I had these Black and some white medical students, Black nurses, Black doctors, in essence, putting their lives in harm's way to take care of the Black community. That's what people felt.
This is literally the very first meeting place of the doctors and nurses who stepped in when the city of Philadelphia, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania were derelict and caught flat-footed during the coronavirus pandemic. There you go.
Okay. You're good.
And people show up at the Black church, and in particular this church, because they trust us. We're 137 years old. This is not our first rodeo. We've been through this before. We've been through negligence. We've been through people despising us. And so this is another opportunity for the church to stand tall.
You said just the COVID test. All right.
The disparities that my congregation faces every single day is sin. There's really no other way to talk about it. What Elah does is not a form of ministry, it is ministry. It is truly the Jesus elements, the red letter Bibles, the stuff Jesus said and did, feed, touch, help, visit. That's what she is. That's what she does.
Results are right now back in about 48 hours, okay? We call everyone who's positive.
If America wants to survive, if it wants to be redeemed, if it wants to exist, it is going to have to handle some of the realities facing people who have found themselves at the bottom of the proverbial well forever. It's an existential threat, this kind of disparity in a country. And I think a lot of the people who politically think that this is a Black or a brown or an urban problem are just involved in malignant neglect. This is no longer benign neglect. This is malignant neglect.
I can tell you honestly, I was not expecting.
So now to be able to be out there and be the voice and be their champion and say, I got you, and mean it, it fills me up. All the sacrifice for all the elders and all the ancestors that came before me allowed me to be poised to do exactly what I'm doing for us, because we need it. And because others weren't there to give it to us the way we needed it, with the quickness that we needed, and little old me from North Philly was able to get it done. That feels good. It makes me angry that in any other situation, a group that's hurting the most is the one that gets the resources, is the one that should be primary for the resource allocation. And yet again, another example of us not being first on the list. I'm tired of not being first on the list. So that makes me sad and angry, but I turn that anger and those emotions into more positive work to drive it forward for us. And that feels phenomenal.
No one number can get at the fact that we have an empathy gap when it comes to Black people and white people and healthcare. So you can look at all the different numbers, but when you think about the fact that when you show up as an African American person to a hospital, that the doctors don't see you as equally human, and they don't take you as seriously just because of the brownness in your skin, that to me is the thing that is the saddest. And it is the thing that we should all focus on and try to fix.
This idea of doing no harm that we have in medicine, COVID-19 and the Black Lives Matter movement, I think, have made it incredibly clear to many people that doing no harm is not enough. It's not enough to do no harm. You have to act.
Every once in a while, there's a moment when massive progress is possible. I think this is one of those moments. I think COVID-19 is that moment that says, we actually can do a lot in the next generation. We don't have to wait 5. But it's not going to just naturally happen on its own.
White Coats for Black Lives was a response to the outcry from the community. The George Floyd murder, on top of a lot of other events that were deeply painful.
COVID-19 in concert with the Black Lives Matter movement, the protests and the activism that pushed the nation to face these systemic inequities has changed the way that people are looking at medicine now. The young people are the most activated and the most passionate about taking it on themselves.
I'm pretty optimistic about the future because of the medical students and resident trainees. They fundamentally seem to understand issues around systemic racism, how that affects health and healthcare. It feels different right now. I mean, the American Medical Association has just introduced a series of legislation really talking about racial justice as a fundamental part of being a doctor.
Our policy as racism as a public health threat acknowledges that the harm has been caused by racism and unconscious bias.
We are so proud at the AMA of our Center for Health Equity. We want to meet the needs and the challenges regarding health equity or the lack thereof.
I think the national conversation does give me a lot of hope because it has a lot of substance. Black maternal health specifically is being platformed by the White House, by a half Black, half Indian vice president. That was such a powerful watershed moment.
We're very glad to have this opportunity to talk about such an important priority for the Biden-Harris administration, and that is addressing the unacceptably high rate of Black maternal mortality in this country.
If I were to describe the ideal institutional medicine, everybody would have the same insurance and the same access to doctors. People would be able to choose where they wanted to get their health care, and that choice would not be predicated on what insurance they have, where they lived, and there would be vastly more doctors of color.
A system that's truly equitable is not a system that delivers the same care to everybody, because not everybody has the same needs. So a system that's truly equitable takes people's needs and preferences and their backgrounds and values and into account, not through stereotypes of, here's what I think your values are, or here's what I think you need, but with a deep engagement of people of what's going on in their lives and what do they really need to be better in terms of their health.
In an ideal world, what care would look like for Black people is that when you walked in a room, someone would be happy to see you. Someone would look at you and sit down. Someone would ask you about your day.
My husband's name is Rolando Aravena.
My father's name was James Glenn.
My dad is Eddie Germain Sr. My little sister is named Monica Willette Simmons.
My dad's name is Jacques Wilbert Toussaint. My father, Jack Colbert Sennett. My cousin, Jacques Toussaint. My uncle, Jocelyn Jean.
I feel like there's this sense of urgency of action now. And really it's over the next 6 months, year, 2 years, that we got to start seeing real change.
I lost 2 cousins, Mr. Adolphus Moss and Mr. Charles Page, 2 great servants, citizens of Sumter County.
My father's name was Lucius Ewan. This is one of my favorite pictures because I think it really exemplifies his peaceful and gentle spirit.
We've got to seize this moment. We've got to do the things that we've been talking about to build an equitable health system. And we got to get going. Because moments of opportunity pass if you don't take them.
It is my fervent hope that this film helped to open your heart a little bit and the way you see health disparities, because the crisis is far bigger than COVID. Acknowledging and understanding the problem is a life-saving, essential first step. And if you're moved by the stories that you heard and you care about your community, our community, I warmly welcome you to join us. Please visit thecolorofcare.org for more information on how you can help, because change is possible and we're the ones to make change happen. I appreciate you watching. Hello, I'm Oprah Winfrey. And I wonder if something like this has ever happened to you when you're reading the news and a story just stops you cold. Well, that happened to me at the height of the pandemic. I read about a Black family in Detroit named the Fowlers. I have to tell you, their harrowing story would not let me rest. In fact, it haunted me. The father, Gary Fowler, worked hard his entire life to provide for his family. And at 56 years old, he was working 80 hours a week as a security guard because his greatest desire was to create a secure, beautiful life for his loved ones. He became ill, started experiencing COVID symptoms. He went to 3 different hospitals. That's right, 3 different hospitals. And here's what stopped me cold. Each hospital sent him home, even though he told them that he'd put his own father in the hospital for COVID. Try to imagine yourself or your loved one going to 3 different hospitals, asking, begging for help. Eventually, Mr. Fowler became so tired, so exhausted, he went home, sat in his favorite recliner, and that's where he died, because hospitals did not think he was sick enough to treat. Can you imagine if access to life-saving healthcare for you or somebody you love depended on the color of their skin? Well, this devastating story had me wondering, how many other Gary Fowlers are there out there? Research says there are far too many, and we need to do something about the larger pandemic that COVID has exposed, disparities in our healthcare system that cost lives. I want this to echo through our culture and particularly our medical community. This needs to change. And my hope, my greatest intention for this documentary is for the stories that we tell and the realities that they represent to serve not just as a wake-up call, but as a call to do something, a call to action. This can be changed, and we're the ones to do it.
The World Health Organization is holding an emergency meeting right now. Now to growing concerns about the deadly coronavirus officially hitting the U.S. Here's what we know. A Washington state resident fell ill after returning from Wuhan, China, where the outbreak...
The woman who answered the phone said, well, you know, he's really not doing well. He has no appetite and he's not feeling good. They had no beds in the ICU. And so he never left the emergency room. He never really regained consciousness, and he never left there. And we never saw him again. He was my brother, my playmate, my bike riding buddy, my tree climbing. That was my brother.
April 9th, they took him to the hospital. I'd keep calling and just trying to reach somebody to find out what is going on. And the way one of the doctors responded, it was like, well, do you really want him intubated? I said, well, do whatever you can to keep him alive. It was as though, like, he's a ward of the state. You know, he's on Medicaid and Medicare, and it's like, so what's the concern? That didn't come out, but it was intimated that way. By the 17th, he was dead.
You'll be out in a few days. No big deal. We'll say goodbye.
The first case of the deadly coronavirus making its way to the U.S.
They put him in a wheelchair And he just looked at me and he just said, like, Mel, I want you to know that I never knew a love like this before. I love you so much. And I said, I love you too. We're gonna get through this. You're gonna get through this. You're young, you're healthy. But
she was still on a gurney when she coded.
The daily death tolls, nearly 2,900 people yesterday alone died of the coronavirus. That's one every...
I was talking to family, and they were describing calling for EMTs to come pick them up, and the EMTs not arriving, or the EMTs convincing them that they didn't need to go to the hospital, or not believing that they were sick. They were describing going to the hospital and being sent home, not being believed that they were ill.
She had called twice. They talked her out of going twice.
I was told, you have COVID, but we can't give you a test because if we test everybody that come in here, we've been ran out of tests 2 weeks ago.
One of my sons took me to the hospital and they turned me away.
My husband had died and I never got a phone call.
Americans go from seeing this thing on TV in China to understanding that it is